Welcome to the HealthChangers podcast, presented by Cambia Health Solutions, where we share real stories of healthcare transformation from those experiencing it and those helping to make healthcare more personalized. I'm your host, Rachel. Today on HealthChangers, a conversation with Mark Ganz, Cambia's Chief Executive Officer. Mark is retiring at the end of this year, 2020. Since taking the top post, he's guided the company and industry along a path of reimagining and reshaping healthcare to be more empathetic, transparent, and economically sustainable. In this episode, Mark looks back at more than 2 decades at Cambia and offers his perspective on where healthcare is headed after a year of pandemics and social justice awareness. Joining Mark for this conversation is Susannah Fox, a Cambia board member who serves as a researcher and advisor to health and technology companies. She's the former Chief Technology Officer for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and she worked previously at the Pew Research Center.
Mark, as you know, I have been a board member for Cambia since 2017, and you also know that I've been a big fan of yours since before then. So I'm really excited to talk with you about your career and the accomplishments that you have been able to bring to Cambia. So I'm going to dive right in. I would love to have our listeners go through a brief timeline of your journey at Cambia. You've been CEO for 18 years. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear about what that has meant to you.
So yes, I've been with the company for 29 or just almost 29. I started in 1992, early 1992, and applied for a job that I was not qualified to apply for, which was kind of fun. And I thought but it was one of those, what the heck, I'll give it a go, because I wanted to go work for the company. And not only did I get the job, but I got a job that I didn't think I was applying for. I thought I was applying to be an assistant general counsel, reporting to a general counsel, and only found out during the interview process that I was actually going to be the general counsel. It was the title they used was in the one ad was not clear, and so
now hold on. What is a one ad? Remind people what is.
I'm dating myself. It was the classified ad in the newspaper that advertised for what they called a corporate counsel, which I always thought was going to be like an assistant. But anyway, I ended up. I kind of was like, well, I'm committed. I'm going to keep going for it. And I actually ended up getting the job and had a tremendous leader in the CEO who really allowed me to do my job and innovate. And he didn't, he was not a mother may I type of CEO. He was a really good team leader. And we had a tremendous team. And I just grew and learned so much. And then 4 years later, it was actually 3 years later, we formed the Regents Group, which is now Cambia, with 3 other companies. That was unusual too, and I played a big role in helping bring those 4 companies together all at once. And usually you think of mergers or acquisitions as being like one company with another company. In this case, it was 4 that came together at one time, and we pulled it off. And so then a year after that, I moved to Portland and have been, was the chief legal officer until 2001. Then I became the CEO of the largest subsidiary, Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon. At that time, it was a CEO role, full P&L responsibility and the like. And then 2 years later, became the CEO of the Regents Group, now Cambia Health Solutions. So yeah, that's how that was my journey in a nutshell. And what I would say was kind of the fun thing about it is, other than applying for that job in 1992, all the other roles I didn't actually apply for. I was asked in, and I did, and it came in an unexpected way. I wasn't gunning for the job or angling for it. It was something that just happened, which I think I often turn that into advice to people who want to, quote, move up in an organization. And I just say, do the job you're paid to do. first. Don't ambition to the next job, or you'll take your eye off the ball of the job you're being paid to do now. But also realize that in the job you're being paid to do, there are infinite opportunities for innovation and to turn that job into something that the company never could have imagined it could do and be. And I actually think that's why I ended up moving in the organization, was because I always did that. I always tried to make the job bigger than it ever had been, because there's always things to contribute in an organization. They're human organizations. They're flawed. We are, inherently, but that means there's always opportunity to make better. And that's what I've tried to do.
I love that advice that you give to people that you're mentoring and managing. The advice that I have given to people, which I have lived through, is every day is a job interview. You never know. You never know who, I remember I'd be up on stage giving a speech to a big, 300 people in the auditorium, and, nobody claps. But there's one person in the back of the room who gets what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And that's the person who follows up later. Yeah. And it's also true in an organization where you don't know what impact you're necessarily having on people, but just act with integrity. Act as if somebody is actually interviewing for the job that you want to have next, as well as being excellent in the position that you have. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the pandemic, because that has really shifted the landscape for Cambia, for healthcare in general. Has the pandemic changed how you view healthcare? And I'll also say that the healthcare industry is innovating at a faster pace in terms of public health, in terms of the science. We're seeing so much innovation, which we're really in dire need of. Do you think this pandemic will change healthcare forever?
Short answer, yes. Here's how I think about healthcare, just through my long career with it, is that it's an industry that has been particularly resistant to change. It has, it's like I think of it as like a huge ice flow, like an ice, sheet of ice, out in the polar regions maybe. And so if you want to make progress with it, it's like you have to get your icebreaker, get in your icebreaker and try to, pound against it. And you can make some, you have to know where you're going, and you have to be resolute about it, because it's hard to do. But, and sometimes you run up against it where you just, you crash the ship into it and it just doesn't move. But there's always hope for tomorrow. There's always hope that something will happen. And in my career, there have been things that have had the effect of breaking up ice flows, cracking them open. And so you can navigate your ship through to make progress, but you also have to still respect that the ice is still all around you, and that it could simply crush your ship as you try to move it through. But you have to go forward with courage and with that sense of vision of where you're trying to go. So I would say the passage of the ACA was very much had that impact on the industry, and it broke up some ice flows, but it also created some new ones. I think that COVID-19 and the worldwide nature of it, and the wide impact it's had on everyone, unlike things like the ACA or other things that had more impact on some than others. Yes, COVID has had more impact on some than others, but it's impacted everybody profoundly. No one's been able to be a spectator. And so I think it's just had this tremendous force of breaking up ice flows. And I think that the opportunity for innovation that comes out of this, that's already started within the pandemic, but is going to continue coming out of the pandemic, is going to be amazing. And I think it's high time. And so examples, obviously, of more virtual health, healthcare, where healthcare comes to you instead of you having to go and kneel at the altar of the healthcare institution, so that you can plead for the help that you need and they will deign to give it to you. Now it's going to be quite different. It's a lot of the movement toward a consumer orientation has been underway. I'd say Cambia has been one of the drivers of that. I'm proud of that. But now, because of the pandemic, it's just accelerated it. And it's created a momentum and a critical mass of the usage of it that I'm so excited about. I think that mental health, which is it's to me the epidemic that has sprung out of the pandemic, and that will be with us for years, is the mental health crisis that this has created and is creating for so many people. And I think that finally, perhaps, we will finally see the weaving together of a person's physical health, their mental health, and their spiritual health all together.
I think you're right that emotional well-being and our spirits are now part of the public conversation about health and healthcare, and we can't go back. And what I have found so inspiring about working with you, Mark, is that you have brought forward your experiences in life, and you've brought forward your experience as a caregiver. You've brought forward your experience attending death into your work as the CEO of Cambia. And by doing that, you actually unlock all of your colleagues' ability to bring their lives forward into their work. I would just love to hear you talk a little bit more about why palliative care is important to you and important to Cambia.
I could give you a right and a left brain response, and I'll give you a little of both. Maybe a heart and mind response might be a better way to put it. The heart comes all the way from my childhood when I'd go on rounds with my father, who was a family physician, and that's when primary care docs used to actually, have admitting privileges to hospitals and would go and see their patients all the time. Boy, that's talking about the good old days. But I would go with him after church on Sundays. And I remember it was always kind of a little bit intimidating. I enjoyed the adventure of going to the hospital, but also, hospitals have that unique smell, and they had that, you saw a lot of people who were really sick there. And I remember it also being somewhat intimidating, but I always felt safe being with my dad, and the nurses were always very nice and the like. But I remember, a few of those times when Dad was ministering to someone who was dying. And I watched him without knowing what he was doing, without having a name for it. I just thought it was just being a good physician. But, not only talking to patients with great compassion and care and with honesty about what they were going through, but doing the same with their families. And for me to be able to watch that through the eyes of a child and seeing my dad do that left a lasting impression. And so then I always kind of sat there like a seed that had been planted, and it just kind of grew. And then, I became CEO in the summer of 2003. Oh no, I guess spring of 2003. And I remember it was October of to when my dad fell ill with a disease that would kill him. And so here we are in the middle of, I'm starting to launch the transformation process in our company and setting a new vision with a new team. And at the same time, I'm experiencing the reality that Dad was very ill and terminally so. And so watching that experience or being part of it with my brothers and sisters gave me an insight about the beauty that can come from that. I would say my dad did maybe his greatest work for our family during the time he was dying, the greatest healing for our family. And I know death isn't always a healing experience for families, but it was for ours. And I give my dad a lot of credit for making it so. Otherwise, I think he raged against the darkness a little bit. The dying of the light, that poem, Dylan Thomas. He was very much one who raged against the dying of the light, and it was hard for him to let go. But he was a man of great faith, and he did it ultimately with grace. That kind of re-engaged that seed that had been planted, and I think when we formed the foundation and we knew we wanted to have a signature focus, that really spoke to me. The idea of leaning in and making palliative care as mainstream as physical care, and supporting those great practitioners that did that. And so that was the decision of the heart. The decision of the mind was, if we're going to transform healthcare in this country, you can't just do it all at once. A wise person once told me, that the way to make progress in some ways is think of like a bowling analogy. You don't try to knock 10 pins down by having the ball hit all 10 pins at once. The ball has to hit the center pin and at the right way, and then the center pin is what takes out the rest of the balls, and that's how you get a strike. So I think that that's true for transformation of an industry, is that you have to pick your center pins. And I felt that when you think about the poignancy, the importance of the experience that individuals and families go through with serious illness, and if you could transform that to being something that is truly focused on the needs of the individual, where the individual's in charge, not the healthcare provider, you turn it. Because so many people get taken for a ride. It's like they get a diagnosis and then they just kind of enter the machine, and the machine just whisks them along. And there's not much attention paid to what their own heart, needs are. And if we could change that, and so that every individual and their family would be ministered to and feel like they had self-determination about how they were going to go through an illness, whether they wanted to go for a cure all the way or whether they wanted to go a different path and just, live their very best life every day, whether it was in treatment or in not treatment. But that they would have that choice and they could move forward. And so I thought if we could make a change in that, then we can prove to healthcare, we can prove to ourselves that we can change the entire system. And that's how I believe real change happens, is you change something that's very powerful, a powerful experience that people have, and you have a critical mass of people in this country that have that experience and go through that experience. You change that and you can start instilling a sense of hope. Because I think so many people they lack a sense of hope that the healthcare system can change and be better and be more person-focused and be more economically sustainable. They think, it's kind of all lost, so I'll just pass the buck to to Congress or to the government to take care of it, knowing that it probably won't. So that, the idea was change people's hearts that are in industry by seeing that change can happen. Change people's hearts that are being served, and not only is it better experience for them, but they become believers. And if they say, if it can be this way when I'm seriously ill, why can't it be this way every time I engage with healthcare? So that was the mind part of it, and it was a perfect marriage.
I hear a through line in our conversation, and I see a through line in Cambia's work. There's a through line in Cambia's work in terms of the centering on the individual, centering on the patient, and with the understanding that the more that we can serve people where they are with what they need, the better off they will be. And that's behind the Journey platform. And I actually see a connection between that focus on the family CEO, which is often a caregiver role, that Journey is focused on, as well as the focus on the family and the caregiver that palliative care is often focused on. This goes right toward what you were saying about the common experience of the COVID-19 pandemic, that it's broken up these ice flows and sort of forced us to confront some of the disparities, forced us to confront some of the old ways of doing things. This is going to lead me to ask you a question about innovation, because I think that so much of what we're talking about and so much of what Cambia really brings to the healthcare is this sense of innovation. So could you talk about some of the innovations that you are most proud of across your years?
Maybe one of the most innovative things that I guess I'm proud of is taking a very staid, bureaucratic culture of a large company when I became CEO and figuring out basically by hook and crook how to lead the company to being a consumer-focused, consumer-obsessed organization. And I will tell you, it has taken every ounce of my creativity and leadership to figure out how to reach a very diverse set of colleagues from across multiple states, and, bringing in new people and completely revamping our board of directors to one that is, much more diverse and in all aspects of diversity, and a senior leadership team the same, and trying to drive, that through the organization. And to do it not because it's like, well, we're supposed to do that, but to make sure that the why was always in front of people so that it would engage their hearts in the process. And it wouldn't be just a thing of check the box, right? But that people would see and understand and be infused with the why so that they wanted to do it. They saw that there was no other way but to do it. That to me was, that's a personal one. Beyond that, I would say, obviously, I'm very proud of all the years of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into creating Journey. I don't think I would have wanted it any other way, but to be able to at least be able to say before I was done with my time that we brought it to market successfully, and we have. Now it will be up to Jared and the team and you as a board member to see that it grows in the market and that the market recognizes it for what it really, the greatness that it is, and that we're really savvy about how we market it and sell it, and that it become the juggernaut that I believe it has the power to be, because it is the smartphone to the health insurance old black phone on the desk, if you will. It is so far beyond, and it doesn't render the health insurance part of the business obsolete. It just renders it from being the platform to merely an app on a much more fulsome platform that people will want to interact with. And I'm very proud of the hard work and the constant sort of needing to always be true to the strategy, but change the tactics as necessary, given things like the ACA and all the other things that come at a company. That you adjust tactics, but you never change the strategy. You never you have constancy of purpose. I think, I would say in the pure play health insurance part of the business, probably the biggest change that we've had that has a legacy throughout the industry, and there is no doubt in my mind that we were the ones that lit the fire and stoked it, and that was the notion that it matters, that the individual member matters. Mm-hmm. That is the only customer that really matters, and that doing deals to bring on an employer as a customer, as the paying customer, that's more like a business partnership. that gives us access to serve the individual and their family. And I think there was massive confusion in the industry prior to the time that we came along and started driving that. There was this sense of, well, no, the customer is the group, it's the employer. And so, or some would say, well, no, the customer is sometimes the member. But because I saw it in our own company, because there was that confusion, and then some people would say, well, no, the customer is the provider. And I was like, wait a minute, who's paying whom? We're paying the provider. We're their customer, maybe, but they're not our customer. They're a business partner that helps us ultimately be able to serve our customer, the individual and their family, well. But having that kind of razor-sharp clarity is what I think began a lot of the innovation and stoked it, not only in our company, but across the industry. And I remember not so long ago, Susannah, when I started 18 years ago, and I remember I started talking about the customer as the member with my colleagues in the Blues, I got a lot of these sort of pats on the head, you don't get it kind of, someday you'll learn, Mark, that isn't really where the game's at. And I just sort of smiled and said, well, we'll see. And so by us developing products and services that were aimed to serve the individual and their family, and starting there, and then thinking about everything else we do, whether it's with providers, whether it's with groups, it is all because we are wanting to serve that individual as best as we can, because they're the ones that are in the center of healthcare. And now the industry, that's now kind of the common talk. And at a time when no one thought the consumer mattered in healthcare, now everyone talks about the consumer matter, but Cambia is way ahead a lot of organizations. And you and I are aware of a couple of organizations that we've encountered, and that was one of the things that we observed very quickly, how far ahead we were in our way of thinking, the culture we built to serve, and the actual products that we serve them with. And I'm very proud of that. That was an innovation challenge for sure. I would say Clayton Christensen would call that the innovator's dilemma. And he would say most long existing organizations can't do it because they convince themselves it isn't important because they're so comfortable in their current business model. And I think Cambia is a company that not only didn't fall into that trap, although at times it felt like we might be slipping into that trap, I feel like we've really moved. That, I hope, is the long-term legacy of the business side of the work that we've done.
That's so important. I do believe that Cambia was able to point out a North Star and steer by that North Star. And I think something else that's really important to note is the four Western states that make up Cambia are really different from each other as individual states, as individual markets. Yeah. And I think that has created a laboratory for innovation. Because the board, for example, needs to have members of the board from each of the four states. Bringing together those points of view has been wonderful to see how the company takes advantage of the diversity of the board and of the viewpoints of the executives from all the four states. I also think that this focus on the individual helped Cambia to stay nimble in terms of seeing the possibility of investment, for example, starting to invest in startup companies, building the pipeline for the kinds of services that Cambia wanted to create. That's really a challenge as a CEO to make sure that you have an understanding of your business, your industry, and your role in it, but also having a view, a more global view, to know sort of where the trends are going. So let me ask you now to take out your crystal ball or to look at where the winds are shifting. Can you give us all some advice about where you think healthcare is going in the future? Or maybe how would you like to see healthcare transform? And you can pick the timeline, whether you want to say 5, 10, or 20 years.
It'll probably be somewhere in that range, 5, 10, or 20. It depends on the thing. I would say a couple of ones that are kind of my hit list of what I think that where we're headed. I mean, my vision would say we will see, and it might be 10 years, basically the full weaving together of the understanding of caring for people, body, mind, and spirit, instead of just body. Oh, that spirit thing. Yeah, well, there's some people over there that do that, and maybe we'll get them.
Call the chaplain.
And if it's the mind thing, well, golly, there's a pill for that. Otherwise you have to go see a psychiatrist over there, kind of thing. That kind of notion of either just willy-nilly prescribing antidepressants when somebody needs much more than just a pill, and where there's not enough people who are in the psychotherapy business to meet the demand. That we're certainly seeing that this year. Whether it's using telehealth, which has just been one of probably the most beneficial use of telehealth that we've seen this year has been in the mental health area. And I think what's happening is that people, there's always that stigma, like you go see a mental health provider and you don't want to park in the parking lot because somebody might see your car there, or you might run into somebody, and then it's like, uh-oh. But with telehealth and the idea of people coming to your house to be able to provide that kind of care, that is going to transform mental health care. It's going to help people overcome that sense of stigma, like about even going and getting that care. And that people then will get the kind of counseling that they need, along with, if there's a pill that is a good pill for whatever they're suffering from. But I'm very bullish on that. I think that's going to be, we're going to see profound change. The second profound change is going to be the notion of, call it doctor on demand. But the idea is that we're going to see more and more primary care providers whose primary office is their car. And it'll probably be a battery-powered car, an electric car, but it will be one that they will be coming to your house or to your office and ministering to you there, as opposed to the primary default being that you go to the bricks and mortar office there and wait in line in their waiting room there. I do think that for specialty care, that'll be more recalcitrant to that kind of change. And so you'll probably still have to go to bricks and mortars, for that. But I think primary care is going to transform fundamentally. And I think that's a really good thing. I'd like to see more innovation and investment there than this endless do loop around value-based financial arrangements that you hear. Oh, yeah, we're going to transform primary care by having it all be, quote, value-based. That's just a money transaction. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have a role, but to say that's the thing that's going to change, that's like saying the fact that you have a computer makes you computer literate. No, it doesn't. I mean, it's a cultural change that has to happen that's going to make the difference. That's what's going to create value-based care, is when physicians and clinics think differently about how they serve the individuals they serve. It's not how they get paid, it's how they think and operate. Payment can be an incentive for the right behavior, and that's payment at its best should be that. But to just change the way we pay and hope for the best that people are going to change, that's been tried now for 50 years in various measures. That's what managed care, quote, was all about. Now, that experiment didn't work all that well, did it? If the ultimate measure was that healthcare costs would go down, then it's an abject failure. And we should just call it that and have a little funeral for it and stop reinventing the term and saying it's going to be different this time. So I really feel like this notion around mobile care is going to be a very transformative movement that's going to have impact way beyond just primary care, but it's going to start there. I'm excited about that. I think the movement around health equity is also a profound one. That one's going to be 20 years at minimum. That's going to be a longer one because it's a cultural transformation that has to happen there. And I think there's so many tentacles to it that to do it right means to do it over a long period of time. But I think we're going to need leadership that is going to apply that relentless pressure over time. That kind of change doesn't happen with an explosion. It happens through the relentless flow of creativity and force, saying a gentle kind of force that says this must change, this will change, we can change it, this must change, this will change, we can change it, and just keep at it. But I feel that one is definitely going to be a third mega trend, if you will, in healthcare.
I really appreciate how you brought health equity up because it is something that is top of mind for so many people. And I don't hear many healthcare leaders talking about equity in that way. So I very much appreciate that and hope that there can be innovations that bring that closer to us, whether it's to just, pockets of people. There's going to be pockets of justice that spread. And so I'd like to see some immediate progress, but to have the long-term progress happen in 20 years, I think is a realistic view. Let's talk about next year.
Susannah, can I just say something, though?
Yes.
I agree with you, but I just want to point out that when we adopted our cause 18 years ago, our cause was we will transform healthcare. At the time, we used the term to remove the tyranny that it creates for individuals and families. But what we said was we're going to serve as a catalyst to transform healthcare to make it more person-focused and economically sustainable. Well, when we did that, we talked openly about the fact that did not necessarily, we knew we could not get that if we simply relied on the health insurance legacy that we had inherited from our forebears in the industry. That wasn't the path. It might have a role in the path, but it was not the path. It would take us in new directions. Health equity was part and parcel of that because being more person-focused was about seeing people, like literally seeing them in all their diversity from whatever part they were, and that the healthcare industry needed to see people. The idea that the doctor will see you now, that old saying, well, yeah, there were too many places where people were not being seen. They were invisible to the healthcare reality. The economic sustainability was also personal. It wasn't some grand vision of an economically sustainable system as a whole. Yes, that will be the ultimate maybe outcome. But we have to make healthcare sustainable for individuals and families at the family level, which is all about getting control of price. And so we know with the bringing of Journey to the market as a primary vehicle for an expression of our cause, it is all about health equity. You can't get there without that focus. That is what our cause is about. And because one of the things that makes healthcare, one of the drivers that makes healthcare so inequitable is that everything costs too much. It's way overpriced. And we have a system that actually rewards overpricing products and services. It's called, my stock price goes up because investors are happy with me, because I got the most I could get out of the drug that I sold or the medical device or the labs that I process, the laboratory tests that I process. That's all wrong. There's nothing wrong with the idea that a company pleases its investors, but to say that, to use that as an excuse to rip people off with prices that are not make no sense at all, and then to blame the middleman, the health insurer, for not covering it or not covering it enough or paying the entire price. You know what I mean? That has to be broken up. That's what our cause was about. And we've been fighting that for the 18 years I've been CEO, and I think fully that Jared and the team are going to carry that fight forward. And I know our board, including you, are on fire about that. But it's going to take a long haul to get there. But to me, that's what it's always been about, is you create equity by creating reasonableness of price in a financial model so that people can actually afford it without having to be so dependent on government programs or health insurers. And you do it by focusing on and seeing individuals, because when you see them, you can't but not be compelled to address their needs. It's the blindness that allows this kind of machine to keep rolling forward and for everyone to look at each other and go, yeah, that's okay.
Right, or we just can't, or give up, as you've said previously, that we can't give up. And I will just say, I have not heard many healthcare executives say the word tyranny.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I think part of what I've tried to be is a truth teller and to use the words that describe it, and even if they feel harsh. Part of the reason we took tyranny out of our cause, that word, was that and this was one of those learnings as a CEO about how far you can push a culture, how fast, was when we put that in, it offended a lot of our employees. It surprised me that they were offended, and it made them feel bad about their what they had devoted their life to, because they didn't like saying that they were part of a system that tyrannized people. And so then there was a lot of pushback in saying, that it was like, well, I didn't want to disillusion people, or, you know what I mean? It was like you boil the frog slowly when it comes to culture change. And so we removed that word, but we did not remove the fundamental elements and the strength of the cause. And I would say, ironically, that our employees, our 5,000 or so employees, would probably be more open and okay with that word again, because now they've evolved so much that they're not afraid of it, or just, or it doesn't offend them. It's more like now they see it, and it creates a sense of urgency. That's something that I guess, when I think about my next step, my next chapter, as I close out my long chapter here with this company, is being the CEO was never my vocation, and it was never my ambition. It was just an incredible honor and responsibility that I received 18 years ago. And what a ride it's been. The people I've had the opportunity to work with, and the people that I've gotten the opportunity to meet, including you, Susannah, it's just, my heart's really full. My vocation, however, is by no means completed, because my vocation was not to be CEO. My vocation was to transform healthcare in this country, to make it more person-focused and economically sustainable for families. And that will continue to burn brightly. And how I continue to pursue that, there are some things that I know that I'll do. There's probably a lot that I don't know yet, and I want to be able to reflect, and I think the opportunities will present themselves, because they always have in my life. And then it's just a matter of saying yes. And I'll miss Cambia. I'll obviously miss the great relationships, but I won't be far, and I'm sure that whatever other things that I'm doing going forward, our paths will cross again, because Cambia is going to keep doing the work it's doing, and if I keep doing the work I'm doing, hey, look, we're gonna, we may be in different vineyards, but we're all trying to make the best wine possible for the people we serve.
That's the perfect note to close on. And let me just say thank you for your service to Cambia. Thank you for your service to the United States and the healthcare system, because what you have done is created the opportunity for everybody else to see the North Star, that you've helped to point out. And we are all steering toward the horizon of individuals being respected and seen. And that is in very large part thanks to you, Mark.
Thank you, Susannah.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me today for our podcast. I think you two are some of the most influential health changers we've ever had on the show. And, you know, a health changer to us is someone who truly is transforming healthcare and making it more personalized. And I want to thank you both for your contributions, both to the industry. And Mark, I want to thank you personally for your leadership at Cambia. I've learned so much from you, both personally and professionally. And I'm so looking forward to seeing what you do next. I know you won't rest for long before taking up that sword again to serve people and their families in our community. So thank you both for joining me today. And I'm so excited to have you both here on this podcast. That wraps up this episode of Health Changers. You can find more information on all our episodes at cambiahealth.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at Cambia, Cambia. You can now find Health Changers on all your favorite platforms. Just search for Health Changers on platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for listening.